Welcome to CEO 101, which is a meeting we have for people who recently joined GitLab. They have the opportunity to ask questions about our value and anything else. Our values, I should say. Bruno, you have the first one. Thanks for that. Do you want to verbalize it?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Bruno. My question is about early decisions. I want to know what were the top decisions. Doesn't have to be three, but like the top early decisions that made GitLab thrive as a company, because I know it's hard to scale a company, especially when you're starting out. So I want to know about the top decisions that you made early on to make GitLab a successful company. Yeah. So.
Yeah, thanks. I think we made it open core, as in there's some paid features. And we tried a lot of other models, including like Ping for support. And those didn't scale. So I think it's essential to have selling software features. Having the features proprietary is essential to selling them. Selling software is essential to having high margins, and high margins are essential to growing as a startup and growing in size. So I think that was essential. Another one was kind of listen to customers. A very early customer was a Fortune 1 company, and we listened to what they wanted, and we added those features to GitLab, and turned out those features were very indicative of what other people wanted. So that worked out really well. And the other one was building a platform. When Camille proposed combining GitLab CI in the version control application, that was initially something that me and Dimitri were against, but he convinced us, and it turns out that a single application is a much better user experience. You don't have to hop between 10 different apps to get something out the door. So I think those three calls were very important for our later success.
Sure, thank you. Thank you.
Cool, and I'll throw in a bonus one.
Please.
I came to the US, I applied for Y Combinator, we got in, and I was set on not raising external funding. But I think in hindsight, it allowed us to build momentum and be a lot bigger and be a lot more exciting, and be able to make a better offering in the marketplace. So that turned out to be work out well in the end as well. Tyler, you have the second one. Thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for doing this. I'm Tyler. My question, so getting ready for this call, I was reading through some of the topics pages and the values, and I was looking at the biggest risks page in the handbook, which identifies confusion about the expected output as a risk. And then underneath there are bullets about what GitLab does, organizationally to mitigate that risk. And I think there's a lot of good stuff there. But I was it resonated with me as a new team member. I started November 30th, just about, understanding what's expected, right? And like that metric. And it's challenging as a new person. I think there's a lot of information out there in GitLab. And I was just, wanted to ask you in terms of the results value and trying to be a manager of one, if beyond the organizational safeguards in place for this, are there any like a set of questions I could ask myself in the morning, right? When I'm doing the prioritization of my day, or perhaps questions you ask yourself or things that other folks can ask. How can we individually mitigate confusion about the expected output?
Yeah, thanks for that. Although I appreciate the manager of one sentiment, I do think it's a very good question to ask your manager. Like, what does success look like? How am I going to get an exceeding performance rating at the end of the year? It's a very hard question to get as a manager, but that's why they are managers, because they have to be able to answer that question. And hopefully the answer is a combination of kind of continuous job duties. Like if you're in engineering, we expect a couple of merge requests, like about 10 merge requests a month, plus like contributing to the quarterly goals, plus making the company as a whole better. So hopefully the answer is something like that. But I hope that, hey, your website full stack design, I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's like, hey, our website should have a very low bounce rate. And probably we're going to do that by making it easy to navigate, by making it look good, by making it load fast, by making sure the content is there, by making sure there's no broken hyperlinks. There's a whole bunch of things, but hopefully there's kind of a North Star metric for you. And if there's not, like work with your manager to define it and to document it and to make sure that everyone is aware.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Rachel, thanks for your question.
Hi. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was a question that I was asked in one of my interviews, and I thought it was really great. Is there a value, one of the GitLab values that's kind of not intuitive for you or that you've had to work towards to achieve? For example, I'll be vulnerable. I'm a perfectionist, and it's really hard for me to iterate. So for me, iteration is something that I hope to work on while I'm here. I'm curious if you have any values that are difficult for you.
Yeah, thanks. And nice shirt or nice hoodie. I think the iteration value is the hardest value, just because it's so counterintuitive. We have a bunch of ambitious people and they like start painting a picture of the future. And then you get so excited that you don't do the smallest thing. I get corrected frequently on like, hey, Sid, we could do something smaller. And it's just very hard. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with someone of something outside GitLab, and he was like, let's build 50 houses. I'm like, how about you get one mobile modular unit out there in the next 2 days, because you can do it that fast instead of starting a whole contracting cycle and spending 3 months. And it's like, oh yeah, like there's a quicker way, but it's not intuitive. And every day at GitLab, I propose stuff where people say, look, we could do that faster if we keep it smaller. And I think people externally always say, oh, transparency, isn't that hard? And like, it's not hard. Just live stream it. You just write it down. Like it becomes second nature. Iteration should continue to be tough, because we have vision, we have ambition. It's just that we need to differentiate between the vision and the ambition, and the first step.
Thanks. And for the record, I used to work at Atlassian, so that's the only reason I'm wearing this sweatshirt. I don't have a new GitLab hoodie yet.
I think it's totally fine. And thanks for picking GitLab as a place to work. And I think Atlassian is a great company too. So
I'm excited to be here. So thank you.
And you also had an extra question, if there's time. Well, we're blazing through the questions, so it certainly is time.
Sweet. So my second question was, if you could start over today, would you choose to build GitLab in Ruby on Rails, or is there another framework or language that you would want to build it on?
I'm disappointed in the world that there is nothing obviously better today. I like new frameworks. I like all of them. Phoenix, as a Ruby on Rails person, is tempting. The Elixir framework. I think Redwood JS from the ex-GitHub founders, or the GitHub founders, is very exciting. There's a ton of really exciting frameworks. I'm still encouraging companies to pick Ruby on Rails, because there's so much thought into, for example, the security of it. If you have companies like Shopify, GitHub, GitLab, all focusing on making it better, then that is just so much free value you're getting. That's hard to overcome. Now, it makes total sense if you're going to do hundreds of millions of WebSockets like Discord or something like that, to pick something else. Very endemic with Erlang. If you're going to do something more infrastructure-wise, it makes sense to pick Go. There's a great case for JavaScript, which is becoming the most common, or which is probably now the most common language, and allows you to get more talent in. But I think the amount, if your application is about kind of handling business complexity and business logic, I think Ruby on Rails is the framework, because it's just an order of magnitude. Well, not an order of magnitude, but it's significantly more productive. And GitLab is all about helping people collaborate on code. It's a lot of business logic. So I think I'd pick the same today, which is funny because Ruby could be better, but at the same time, Ruby 3 looks like it's significantly faster, and lots of exciting things to look forward to.
Thanks.
Daniel.
Yes. So my question is about a bit about my experience as a new hire. I am able to see how GitLab looks like now, and I know that it has grown a lot in a very short amount of time. So I kind of cannot get a picture of how it looked like when it was just much smaller, or just a small group of people. And so based on your perspective, I would like to know, what do you think was the biggest loss or biggest drawback that could be associated with the exponential growth that has happened in the last years?
Yeah. I think that, like, if you look at, like, when GitLab was a smaller company, what was different? No, so not so much about the growth, but just company size. I think that what you get is less variability, less chaos, less ability to quickly influence things. You get more specialization. So if you look right now, like we have a ton of job families. People do very specific things, and most of the time that leads to much greater efficiency. Like they are much more knowledgeable about that exact space, and because they keep doing similar work, they're much better at it. The beginning of the company, there's more chaos. People do different things. They do them poorly. There's more mistakes. And there's a lot of extra work, kind of long hours and hurt emotions to kind of make up for the loss of that. So it's I think that's the big change. I think it's so much easier to run a company that's bigger, because like we can predict out longer. We have specialists in every function who know what they're doing. So my job got a whole lot easier. But if some people really like the chaos and the opportunity it provides them to do new things. So I think it's really important to keep living our value of everyone can contribute. And I haven't seen it yet, but I'm paying attention that there's no like stay in your lane, or hey, that's not even your department, or stuff like that. That will be very sad, because we want people at GitLab to be able to contribute to things that are not their day job.
Thanks. And do you think there was any drawback from the growth? Anything that was lost from when the company grew much bigger?
I think so it's very natural. If things are improving at a rapid rate, you start becoming very ambitious about the future. And sometimes I'm like, well, we could do more. Look, we did that before. We can aim higher. And I see that, for example, always like, oh, let's focus on all the functionality we've already kind of shipped, and let's make sure it's mature. Now that's super important. It should be the majority of our time, but it's not set in stone. Like we can bite off new sections now more than ever. So that's something I now have to. Well, I guess I've always been pushing there, so I'm not sure it's different. And I think we should be cautious that there's enough room for people to grow. So make sure that people can shadow me, and that there's a lot of training materials out there, and that they can transfer across the company if they want to do something else. I think that's really important for people. And you're a support engineer, you want to spend a day with a salesperson, and the salesperson likes it, we can make that into a program.
Right. Thanks.
Thanks for the question. Dominic.
Yeah. Hi. So my question is on a similar vein about the growth of the company, but specifically about development teams. So at a lot of other companies, it's a big challenge to scale a development team as the company grows. And I was just wondering if that has been the case for GitLab. And do you find that like being asynchronous and remote helps or maybe hinders that in a way? Just curious what your thoughts were around that.
I think in general, asynchronous makes it harder to coordinate, but it does force you to do the right thing earlier because it's harder. And we've done the right thing earlier, and that's why we can scale. I think that one of the pages I'm most proud of at GitLab is the categories page. Now, it's not much to look at, but you go in here and pipeline authoring. Like, oh, this is the design manager, and this is it falls under this section. So this is Jackie is the product manager, and this is the person who does analyst relations. Like, I've never seen a company being able to do that. Like, spec out every single part of the product and say, who are all the cross-functional people working on this? I think this is one of the secrets why our engineering has not gone down in efficiency, actually gone up in efficiency as we've grown. And there's a whole lot of other reasons. Like, we have great productivity metrics. We have a great quality department that makes sure that people can contribute without fear of breaking everything, and that the tests run fine. And there's a ton of work on every department. But you'd be surprised at how many companies don't have clearly defined who does what and who all their counterparts are. And I think it's super helpful. What do people think? Most of you came from other companies. What's your impression? What's your opinion about this question?
I mean, I'll answer since I asked. So for me, I was working at a mid-sized company before. So maybe I saw it grow from like 60 to 200 and something employees. And, it became pretty difficult because and in part of it might've been because we were all in one office, and then we switched to being in two separate offices. And that transition was pretty difficult for us. So yeah, I don't know. For me, one thing I find interesting here is that, like, for instance, development teams are also like, there's basically one development team per department or group, whatever we want to call it. So I don't know if that has maybe helped scale as well. Instead of just saying there's one central development team and everything gets, funneled through them. It's
exactly that's exactly what helped. Like we define a group, and the group has a backend
its
team,
own specific
content people, UX people, and they always deal with the same people. So there's a lot of things that are coordinated through social relations. Like, hey, Dominic, make sure you're on time this month. Like, last month you were a day late. I had to work a bit harder to make it. You're like, yeah, I'll do it right this month. Like, that stuff is very important. You're dealing with the same person, so you get to understand like what their style of working is, how they communicate. How to best collaborate with them, how to hold them accountable. And that's why we've been so nerdy about doing that. And indeed, if you're depending on co-location for that, it kind of works if everyone is in a room. It works okay if everyone's on the same floor. It starts breaking down for multiple floors. It really breaks down for multiple offices, and it totally breaks down as you go in different cities, different countries, different continents.
It's to answer your follow-up question on that, Sid, it's funny that you mentioned the different floors and buildings. At my last role, I did almost exactly the same job description that I do here. And I worked in so I did web development for a marketing team, but the web development team sat on the first floor and the rest of marketing was on the fourth floor. And then we had a designer in Virginia, and then we ended up, we had a merger. So then we got designers in California. And so we were very hybrid. And then we went remote/hybrid for the pandemic. And I think a lot of this, you also mentioned async is harder to coordinate, but makes you do the right thing. And I've read a lot about how being handbook first is like a cornerstone there. And I think that's my impression has been that the handbook first beyond async and remote is what makes those other things work better, because I've seen remote and hybrid at other companies. And yeah, I think that handbook is just so important. But the floor, but it's funny how much just a couple of floors even begins to start that degradation of the communication.
Yep, totally agree. Thanks for that. Cool. Well, that was the last question on the agenda. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for joining GitLab. And feel free to ping me in the CEO channel or with DM if there's anything I can do to help.